Production by Liang Gu, author of The Biography of Hulan River, Shaohong. 1. This April, my third trip to Hong Kong, I felt a bit sentimental. Ever since I decided to go back to Shanghai in such a circle in Chongqing, I have always felt a little conflicted and depressed. I decided to go like this, but I was afraid of going like this. I was afraid that Hong Kong would bring back some memories for me, and I was willing to forget these memories. However, before forgetting, I was very willing to review them again. After living in Guangzhou for a month, life was quite hectic. Being busy, I suppressed the feeling of nostalgia. However, I never let go of the desire to review it and then forget it. I planned to go to Prince Edward Road, Kowloon, to take a look at the house where I first lived in Hong Kong. Take a look at the Butterfly Valley where my girl liked to invite her girlfriends to play at that time. Look for some comic books published in the United States that my boy collected with great concentration at that time. I also want to take a look at the Kennedy Road in Hong Kong, the house when I lived in Hong Kong for the second time. 1 or 2. 8. The dance school, on Hennessy Road, where we took refuge after the outbreak of the Hong Kong War, and what I especially want to see is Xiao Hong's grave, in Repulse Bay. I keep these wishes in my heart. When I have a little free time, these wishes come to bother me. However, I could never muster up the courage to fulfill these unfulfilled wishes. Until I left Hong Kong, I did not go to Kowloon, nor did I go to Repulse Bay. In fact, I often avoided it as if it was against my heart, and often made excuses to delay it. Although I never said that I had such plans, nor did I urge me to fulfill these wishes quickly. Over the past 20 years, I have also experienced some ups and downs in life. If it makes me angry, it is not sad, and it is always heavy on my heart. Therefore, there is nothing that I am willing to forget, but cannot bear to forget easily, than premature death and lonely death. He sacrificed the joy of childhood in order to pursue the truth, and he was willing to study hard in order to become a useful person to the nation and society. But just when the study was completed, he suddenly died, like an unloaded bullet. This was more emotional than falling in battle. It seemed that it could not be described by simple grief or regret. This premature death has become a heavy emotional burden for me. I am willing to forget it, but I cannot bear to forget it easily. Therefore, I returned to Hong Kong for the third time and wanted to see Butterfly Valley again. It's also boring. But this is not the only place I miss. Even if I go there, I may not be able to bury my sorrow there. People who once had good hopes for life but were repeatedly disillusioned are lonely. They have confidence in their own abilities. A person who has great plans for her work, but the bitter drink of life makes her quite depressed and unable to cheer up, and feels depressed and anxious because of this, will of course be doubly lonely. Once such a mentally lonely person realizes that the light of her life is about to be extinguished and nothing can be remedied, her loneliness and sorrow may not be described in words. And such a lonely death. It has also become a heavy burden on my emotions. I am willing to forget it, but I cannot bear to forget it easily. Therefore, I wanted to go to Repulse Bay for a visit but finally avoided it many times against my own intention. 2. Xiao Hong's grave is lonely and isolated in Repulse Bay, Hong Kong. During the swimming season, there should be many men and women in Repulse Bay every year, but Xiao Hong lying there was lonely. In December 1940, that was the year before Xiao Hong's death, when her health was not a problem yet. She wrote her last work, the novel, The Story of Hulan River. However, even at that time, Xiao Hong's mood was already lonely. And from The Story of Hulan River, we see how lonely Xiao Hong was in her childhood. Reading the few words of the epilogue of this book, one can imagine how lonely Xiao Hong felt when she recalled her lonely childhood. In the small town of Hulan River, my grandfather used to live, and now my grandfather is buried. When I was born, my grandfather is over 60 years old. When I am 4 or 5 years old, my grandfather will be almost 70. Before I am 20, my grandfather will be 70 or 80 years old. My grandfather died as soon as he passed 80. The former owner of the back garden is now gone. The old master is dead. The little master fled. The butterflies, grasshoppers, and dragonflies in that garden may still be the same every year, or they may be completely deserted now. Small cucumbers and large Japanese melons may still be planted every year, but maybe they are no longer available at all now. Did the morning dew still fall on the flower pot stand? Is the sun at noon still shining on the big sunflower? Is the red glow at dusk still turning into a horse and a dog after a while? It changes like that. This is unimaginable. I heard that my second uncle died. The old cook is still young even when he is still alive. The neighbors to the east and west don't know what's going on. As for the miller in the mill, what he is doing now is completely unknown. There are no beautiful stories in what I wrote above, just because they are full of my childhood memories. But I can't forget it, it's hard to forget, I just remember it here. After The Story of Hulan River was finished, in April of the following year, Xiao Hong wanted to go to Singapore because of Ms. Smedley's persuasion. Smedley himself was about to return to the United States and passed by Hong Kong to stay for a month. Xiao Hong asked her about the situation in the Pacific. She said, "The Japanese will definitely attack Hong Kong and Nanyang. Hong Kong can hold out for at least 1 month, while Singapore is unbreakable. Even if it is broken, there are more ways to do it in Singapore than in Hong Kong." Xiao Hong encouraged us and my wife to go too. At that time, I couldn't and didn't want to leave Hong Kong because of my work. I thought Xiao Hong was afraid of being trapped in Hong Kong, in case of war, and I tried to explain it in many ways, but I didn't know why she wanted to leave Hong Kong because she was living in Hong Kong. Lonely. Her mood was lonely. She hoped to be relieved of that terrible loneliness by leaving Hong Kong, and I never imagined that her mood would be so lonely at that time. At that time, after the Wan Nan incident, domestic intellectuals fled to Hong Kong in large numbers. This has resulted in unprecedented activity in Hong Kong's cultural sector. In such an environment, it is difficult to explain why Xiao Hong would feel lonely. By the time I knew and understood all this, Xiao Hong had been buried in Repulse Bay for almost a year. I finally didn't go to Singapore. Xiao Hong fell ill soon and was admitted to Queen Mary Hospital. She was naturally even more lonely in the hospital, but her will to survive was very strong. She hoped to get well, so she endured the loneliness and stayed in the hospital. Her illness was quite complicated, and the doctor was ridiculous. When it was diagnosed that it was lung disease, it was declared that there was no cure. But Xiao Hong is confident that she can survive. Even after the Hong Kong War broke out, she was caught between death from artillery fire and death from illness, and she was still more afraid of the former. However, the loneliness in her heart still the biggest threat to her. After the last operation, she finally died. At this time, Hong Kong had fallen. When she breathed her last breath, many of her friends were not in front of her. She left this world with loneliness. 3. The story of Hulan River shows us that Xiao Hong's childhood was lonely. How monotonous is the daily life of a little girl who solves problems early. There are small cucumbers and large Japanese melons planted every year, and there are butterflies, grasshoppers, and dragonflies in the back garden every spring and autumn. The dark and dusty back room filled with shabby things was her place of recreation. Her kind and childlike grandfather was her only companion. In the early morning, she would read the Tang poems dictated by her grandfather in bed as if they were copying. During the day, I would pester my grandfather to tell those stories that I was really tired of hearing, or look at the stereotyped life of the neighbors for thousands of years, and see if there was any sudden waves in this stagnant life. It was nothing more than the fact that Old Hu's little reunion wife was sick, Old Hu's family was dancing again, and the little reunion daughter-in-law finally died. It was nothing more than the fact that the farmhand Feng Weizui suddenly had a wife and a child, and later, the wife suddenly died again, leaving behind a newly born second child. Life in the small town of Hulan River is also rigid and monotonous. Throughout the year, they live a very regular life. Throughout the year, there must be lively and grand festivals such as dancing, singing yanko, setting off river lanterns, wild stage opera, and the Nyangnyang Temple Assembly on April 18th. And these festivals are as monotonous and boring as their daily lives. Life in the small town of Hulan River is not without sound and color. The streets, alleys, inside every hut, and behind every fence are full of chatter, quarrels, crying, laughing, and even talking in sleep. Throughout the year, grand and lively festivals come one after another like a revolving lantern, and against the gloomy background of daily life, bold lines of red and green with primitive colors appear. Of course, the people in Hulan River are mostly kind. They think according to the habits that have been passed down for thousands of years, and in life, they may sometimes seem numb, but in fact they are also quite sensitive and trivial. They will discuss or argue about trivial matters for 3 days and 3 nights. They may sometimes appear ignorant and arrogant, but in fact they have no intention of harming others or themselves. They follow the method they think is the most reasonable and just do whatever they want. We are concerned about the unfortunate experience of Lao Hu's little reunion daughter-in-law. Of course we sympathize, we pity her, we feel aggrieved for her, and at the same time we hate her, but the object of our hatred is not the mother-in-law of little reunion's daughter-in-law. We only feel that this mother-in-law is also pitiful. She also follows the habits passed down for thousands of years. And think and live. A victim of her stand, her hateful and pitiable features, were all revealed when she quite calmly changed her body for 50 times, and asked that liar wandering Taoist priest to treat the daughter-in-law of little reunion. She said it clearly herself. She came to my house. I didn't make her angry. What reunion daughter-in-law wouldn't be angry? She beat her 8 times a day and scolded her 3 times a day. But I also beat her. That was because I gave her a blow. I only beat her for more than a month. Although she said I hit him a little harder. But how can you discipline a good person without being ruthless? I also didn't want to beat her hard. I beat her until she started screaming for her sake. If I didn't beat her harder, she wouldn't be able to use her. Why does the old whose mother-in-law believe that her little reunited daughter-in-law must be disciplined severely? What is there about little reunion's daughter-in-law? Why does the old whose mother-in-law believe that her little reunited daughter-in-law must be disciplined severely? What is there about little reunion's daughter-in-law that makes her look unpleasant to the elderly? Because on the first day that little reunion's daughter-in-law came to Lao Hu's house, the neighborhood judged her as, "It's too generous, I don't feel ashamed at all." On the first day I came to my husband's house, I only ate 3 bowls, and it was also against the rules to grow so tall at the age of 14, because the neighbors said that this little reunion my daughter-in-law is not like a little reunion daughter-in-law. This made her mother-in-law even more convinced that she must be disciplined strictly, and because she just wanted to give her a kick in the pants, this too generous little reunion daughter-in-law actually refused to obey the discipline, crying and shouting, saying that she wanted to return home, so I had to beat her severely for a month. Of course, the neighbors had no grudges against the little reunion wife. They all wanted her to be good, they wanted her to be like a reunion wife. So when this little reunion daughter-in-law was disciplined and became ill, not only her mother-in-law was willing to spend a lot of money to treat her illness, tiaoshan, various folk remedies. The neighbors also enthusiastically gave her advice. And the result? The result is that a black and smiling little reunion wife named 14 years old is actually no more than 12 years old, but she is actually taller and stronger than an ordinary 14-year-old girl. Send him back to his hometown. Life in the small town of Hulan River is full of various sounds and colors, but it is also rigid and monotonous. Life in the small town of Hulan River is lonely. Xiao Hong's childhood life passed in such a lonely environment. It is self-evident how deeply this imprinted on her soul. It is self-evident how deeply this imprinted on her soul. The little reunion daughter-in-law of the old Hu family who unconsciously violated the thousands of years of customs passed down by thinking and living, finally died. Xiao Hong, who consciously thinks and lives against the habits passed down for thousands of years, recalls this lonely town with a tearful smile, with a lonely mood, in the great era of tragic struggle. 4. Some people may think that the story of Hulan River is not a novel. They might say that there is no clue that runs through the whole book. The stories and characters are all fragmented, not a whole organism. Some people may feel that the story of Hulan River seems to be an autobiography, but it is not completely like an autobiography. But I think it's better and more meaningful just because it's not exactly like an autobiography. And can't we also say? The point is not that the story of Hulan River does not look like a novel in the strict sense, but that besides its unlikeness, there is something else, something more attractive than like a novel. These things: it is a narrative poem and a colorful custom painting. A series of sad songs. It contains both irony and humor. It makes you feel relaxed when you first read it, but as you continue reading, your heart becomes heavier and heavier. However, there is still beauty, even if this beauty is a bit morbid, it still can't help but dazzle you. Maybe you want to say that no character in The Legend of Hulan River is positive. They are all poor people who are willing to be slaves to traditional ideas and feel sorry for themselves, and the author's attitude towards them is not simple. She whipped them mercilessly. But she also sympathized with them. She showed us how stupid and stubborn these people who succumb to tradition are. Some are even cruel, but their essence is good. They are not deceitful, not hypocritical, and they are not lazy. They are easily satisfied. I have a second uncle. The old cook, the old Hu family, and the group of people who leak their followers are all such characters. They are like the lowest plants, able to survive with very little water, soil, sunlight, or even no sunlight. Farmer Fong Wise Wheezy is the most vital one among them, so strong that people can't help but praise him. However, I couldn't find anything special about Fong Wise Wheezy. Except that the vitality is particularly tenacious, and this is the tenacity of primitive nature. If we look for the weakness of the author's thought in The Biography of Hulan River, then the problem may not be that the characters written by the author lack enthusiasm, but that the author gives people such an impression when he writes about the nightmare-like life of these characters. In addition to reaping the consequences of their ignorance and conservatism, these characters lived a leisurely and contented life. Here, we cannot see feudal exploitation and oppression, nor the bloody aggression of Japanese imperialism. And these two layers of iron shackles. In terms of the proportion of the people's lives in Hulan River, shouldn't it be less important than their own ignorance and conservatism? 5. When Xiao Hong wrote The Biography of Hulan River, she was in a lonely mood. She could almost be said to be living in seclusion in Hong Kong at that time. In such a big era around 1940, it is somewhat incomprehensible that someone like Xiao Hong, who has ideals for life and has fought against dark forces, would quietly live in seclusion. One of her girlfriends once analyzed her negativity and the root cause of depression, thinking that repeated emotional injuries made this emotional and rational poetess bound by her own narrow circle of private life, and although this circle was cursed by her, it was still restricted by her inclination and could not extricate herself resolutely. She was completely cut off from the vast world where life and death battles were fought. The result was that on the one hand, Chen Yi was too high-minded and dissatisfied with the various activities of intellectuals of her class, thinking that they were all nonsense and boring. On the other hand, they cannot join the working masses of farmers and workers and completely change their lives. How can we not feel depressed and lonely? And the shadow of this mood cast on The Biography of Hulan River is not only visible in the mood of the whole book. It can also be seen in the ideological part, which can be regretted, just as we deeply regret Xiao Hong's early death. August 1946 in Shanghai. Chapter 1. 1. When the harsh winter seals off the earth is filled with cracks. From south to north, from east to west. Some are several feet long, some are 10 feet long, and some are several feet long. They have no direction and can appear anytime and anywhere. As soon as the severe winter comes, the earth will crack open. The cold cracked the earth. As soon as the old man entered the house, he used a broom to sweep away the ice on his beard and said, "Dash. It's so cold today." The ground was frozen and cracked. The coachman, holding the 3 stars on his head, walked around the big whip for 60 or 70 miles. At dawn, he entered the big inn, and the first thing he said to the innkeeper was, "Okay. Oh my God." Like a small knife. After entering the hotel, take off your dogskin hat and smoke a bag of cigarettes. When he reached for the hot buns, he saw that the outstretched hand had numerous cracks on the back. People's hands were cracked by the cold. The tofu seller got up early in the morning and hawked along other houses. He accidentally put the square wooden plate containing the tofu on the ground and couldn't pick it up. Frozen to the ground. The old man selling steamed buns carries a wooden box with hot steamed buns inside. As soon as the sun comes out, he calls out on the street. When he first came out of the house, he walked fast and shouted loudly. But after a while, he had claws on his feet. The soles of the feet are as round as stepping on an egg. It turned out that the soles of his feet were covered with ice and snow. He was very weak when he walked, and if he hadn't been very careful, he would have fallen. Even so, he still fell. It's not good to fall down. The steamed bun box fell over and the steamed buns ran out one by one from the bottom of the box. If anyone saw it, they would take advantage of this opportunity, while the old man fell down and couldn't get up for a while, to pick up a few and eat them before leaving. Wait for the old man to struggle. Lian Mantu picked up the box with Bingshua and counted them, but they didn't count. He got it. He said to the man eating his steamed buns who was not far away, "It's such a cold day, the ground is cracked by the frost, and I swallowed my steamed buns." The passers-by laughed when they heard this. He picked up the box and walked forward. The ice under his feet seemed to be getting higher and higher, making it more and more difficult for him to walk, so his back was sweating, his eyes were frosted, and more ice was hanging on his beard, and because of his breathing, it was broken. The ears and front of the leather hat were covered in frost. The old man walked slower and slower, worried and trembling, as if he was putting on skates for the first time and was pushed onto the rink by a friend. The puppy was so cold that it screamed every night, choking, as if its paws were on fire. It gets colder. The water tank was cracked by the freeze. The well was frozen. On a stormy night, people's houses were sealed up. After sleeping all night, when they got up in the morning, when they pushed the door open, they couldn't open it. As soon as the cold season arrives on the earth, everything changes. The sky is gray, as if after a strong wind. It had a chaotic weather, and the snow was blowing all day long. People walked quickly, and the breath from their mouths seemed to be smoking when exposed to severe cold. 7 horses pulled a cart, running in series one after another in the wilderness, holding lanterns. Swinging a big whip, 3 stars hung in the sky. After running 2 miles, the horse was sweating. As we continued running, this group of people was actually steaming hot in the ice and snow. It wasn't until the sun came up and they entered the lodge that the horses stopped sweating. But as soon as he stopped sweating, the horse's hair was immediately frosted. After the men and horses had eaten, they ran again. There are very few people in this cold zone, unlike in the south. After walking through a village, another village came not far away. After passing a town, another town came not far away. Nothing can be seen here, and from a distance it is all white. It is impossible to see from one village to another. Only by relying on the memory of the person who knows the way can we know which direction we are heading. The 7-horse cart pulling the grain was going to a city near them. Those who brought soybeans sold them. Those who brought sorghum sold the sorghum. When they returned, they brought oil, salt, and cloth. Hulanhi is such a small town. This small town is not very prosperous. It has only 2 streets, one from south to north and one from east to west. The most famous one is the cross street. The intersection concentrates the essence of the city. There are gold and silver jewelry stores, cloth shops, oil and salt shops, tea shops, pharmacies on the cross streets, and there are also foreign doctors who perform tooth extractions. There is a big sign hanging in front of the doctor's door. There was a particularly large row of teeth painted on the sign, as big as a rice bucket. This advertisement was so out of place in this small town that people didn't know what it was, because oil stores, cloth stores, and salt stores didn't have any advertisements. It's just the word salt written in front of the salt store. In front of the cloth store, there are 2 cloth banners hanging in front of the door. They are probably the same ones that have been around since ancient times. The rest, like the signboard of a drug store, is nothing more than just hang the name of the doctor wearing spectacles who stretches out his hand to number the women's veins on the little pillow outside the door. For example, the doctor's name is Li Yongchun, and the pharmacy is also called Li Yongchun. People rely on memory. Even if Li Yongchun took off his sign, people would still know where Li Yongchun is. Not only the people in the city are like this, but also the people who come from the countryside have memorized the streets in the city and everything on the streets. No need for any advertising. There is no need to attract people. If you want to buy things like oil, salt, cloth, etc., you can just walk in and buy them. No matter how big your brand is, people won't buy it. That dentist is an example. The people who came from the countryside thought it was strange to see such big teeth, so many people stopped in front of the big sign to look at it, but they couldn't figure out what the reason was. Suppose he has a toothache. He would definitely not let the doctor use foreign methods to pull it out for him, so he might as well go to Li Yongchun Pharmacy, buy 2 tails of coptis, and then go home and keep it in his mouth. Because the teeth on that sign are so big, it's a bit strange and scary. So that dentist. The signboard has been up for 2 or 3 years, but only a few people go there to have their teeth extracted. Later, the female doctor had no choice but to make a living, so she also became a midwife. In addition to Cross Street, there are 2 streets in the city. One is called Dongerdeo Street. One is called West Erdeo Street. These 2 streets run from south to north, about 5 or 6 miles long. There is nothing to record on these 2 streets. There are a few temples, a few Xiaobing shops, and a few grain stores. There is a fire mill on Dongerdeo Street. The yard of the fire mill is very large. The big chimney made of good red bricks is very high. I heard that the fire mill is not allowed to go in. There are a lot of news in there and it is untouchable. If you touch it, it will burn you to death, otherwise why is it called a grinding machine? It's because there is fire. I heard that horses or donkeys are not used to pull the mill there, but fire is used. Most people think that all they do is use fire. Doesn't that mean the fire is grinding and burning? After much thought, I couldn't figure it out, and the more I thought about it, the more confused I became. However, the fire grinding mill is not allowed to be visited. I heard there was a guard standing at the door. There are also 2 schools on Dongerdeo Street, one in Nantu and one in Beitou. They are all in temples. One is in the Dragon King Temple, and the other is in the Patriarch Temple. Both are primary schools. The one in the Dragon King Temple studies sericulture and is called an agricultural school. The one in the Patriarch Temple. It is an ordinary elementary school with advanced classes, so it is also called a higher elementary school. Although these 2 schools are different in name, there is actually no difference. It's just called an agricultural school. In autumn, silkworms are fried in oil. The teachers just ate a few big meals. Those called higher primary schools have no silkworms to eat. The students there are indeed taller than the students in agricultural schools. Agricultural students start by reading man, hand, foot, knife, ruler, and the oldest ones are only 16 or 17 years old. The students at the higher primary schools were different. There were some 24-year-olds who were playing foreign trumpets. They had been teaching in private schools in the countryside for 4 or 5 years and were only now attending higher primary schools. There are also people who have worked as accountants at the grain station for 2 years and now come to school. The students of this elementary school started writing letters home, and one of them actually wrote, "Is the little bald boy's eyesight healed?" Little Bald Boy is the nickname of his 8-year-old eldest son. The second son and the daughter-in-law have not yet been written. If they were written, I would probably make the letter too long. Because he already has a group of children and is already the head of the family, he always talks more about housekeeping when writing letters. Has the land rent for the landowner named Wang been sent? Have the soybeans been sold? How is the market going? Such students also have great status in the classroom. Teachers also have to respect him. If they are not careful, students like him will stand up, holding the Kanshi dictionary in their hands, and often question the teacher. According to this student, the qian of wanli qiankuan and the qian of dried vegetables are different. The dry for dried vegetables should be written like this. Instead of writing dry. Not only was there no fire mill on Zierdeo Street, there was only one school. It is a halal school located inside the Qinghuang Temple. The rest of the street is the same as Dongerdeo Street, gray and gray. If there are cars and horses passing by, smoke and dust will billow, and it will rain and the ground will be covered with mud. Moreover, there is a large mud pit on Dongerdeo Street, 5 or 6 feet deep. If it doesn't rain, the mud will be like porridge. If it rains, the mud pit will turn into a river. People nearby will suffer from it, and their homes will be filled with mud. When the water in the pit falls, the sky will be clear. It's sunny. When exposed to the sun, many mosquitoes come out and fly to nearby homes. At the same time, the mud pit became more and more pure, as if it was refining something, as if it was trying to extract something from the mud pit. If it doesn't rain for more than a month, the quality of the big mud pit became purer, and the water had completely evaporated away. The mud inside was sticky and black, more sticky than porridge pot and thicker than paste. It's like a cauldron for making glue. It's dark and shiny, and even flies and mosquitoes will stick to it if they fly from there. The little swallow likes water very much. Sometimes it flies up to the mud pit by mistake and lights the water with its wings. It looks very dangerous. It almost doesn't get trapped by the mud pit. It almost doesn't get stuck. It hurries up without looking back. Ran away. If it were a horse, that would not be the case. It has to stick. Not only did it stick, but it also got stuck in. The horse rolled around and struggled for a while. After struggling for a while, the horse lay down without any strength. Once you lie down, it's very dangerous and potentially fatal. But there aren't many times like this. Few people lead horses or pull carts to take such risks. When trouble occurs in this big mud pit, it's mostly during drought years. If it doesn't rain for 2 or 3 months, the mud pit becomes really dangerous. On the surface, it seems that the rain is getting worse. When it rains, it becomes like a small river. How dangerous it must be. It is more than a foot deep and a person would be drowned if he fell into it. In fact, this is not the case. People in the city of Hollandhe are not so stupid. They all know that this trap is very serious. No one dared to be so bold as to lead a horse over this mud pit. But if it doesn't rain for 3 months, the mud pit will dry out day by day, and in the end it will only be 2 or 3 feet deep. Some brave people took the risk and drove the car over it. There were also some brave people who watched others passing by and followed them. As they went back and forth, the 2 sides of the pit became ruts for the wheels. For those who come later, take a look. Someone was already walking in front. The cowardly man was braver than the brave man and drove the car up. Unexpectedly, the bottom of this mud pit was uneven. When someone passed by, his car overturned. The driver climbed out of the mud pit, looking like a little devil. His face was covered with mud, and then he dug his horse out of the mud. Unexpectedly, the horse had fallen into the mud. At this time, some passers-by came forward to help rescue him. There are 2 types of people passing by. One is wearing long robes and short coats, very clean. Even though he looked like that, he couldn't reach out his hand, because his hands were also very clean. Needless to say, he was a first-class gentleman. They stood aside and watched. Seeing that the horse was about to stand up, they cheered and shouted, "Oh! Oh!" but saw that the horse could not stand up again. He fell down again, and at this time they yelled again and yelled, "Oh!" a few more times. But this is a bad drink. The horse wanted to stand up but couldn't stand up. After fussing for a while, it still didn't stand up and just lay there pitifully as it was. At this time, those who were watching the fun felt that it was nothing more than that, and there was nothing new. So the stars dispersed and went home. Now let's talk about the horse still lying there. The passers-by who helped to save the horse were all ordinary people. They are the onion bearers, vegetable sellers, bricklayers, cart drivers, and the like in this city. They rolled up their trousers and took off their shoes. Seeing that there was nothing they could do, they walked down into the mud pit and tried to lift the horse up with the strength of several people. As a result, he couldn't lift it up and the horse couldn't breathe much. So people panicked and quickly untied their horses. I untied the horse from the carriage, thinking that this time the horse would be able to stand up without any burden. Unexpectedly, the horse still couldn't stand up. The horse's head was exposed outside the mud, its ears were trembling, and its eyes were closed. A bald breath puffed out from his nose. Seeing such a pitiful scene, the people nearby ran home and got ropes and winnowing heads. The horse was tied up with a rope and dug from underneath with a twister. People shouted orders as if building a house or building a bridge. The horse was brought out. The horse was not dead, lying beside the road. People poured some water on the horse and washed its face. Some people come and some go to watch the fun. The next day everyone said, "That big blister drowned another horse." The horse didn't die though. As soon as he was coaxed, he said the horse was dead. If you don't say this, I feel that the big mud pit is too intimidating. There are countless cases of cars overturning in this big mud pit. Except for the season frozen by winter, the rest of the year. This big mud pit seems to be given life, it is alive. The water rises and falls. After a while it gets bigger, and after a while it gets smaller again. Everyone is infinitely concerned about it. When there is heavy water, it not only hinders carriages and horses, but also hinders pedestrians. The old man was walking on the edge of the mud pit, his legs trembling, and the child was crying and screaming in fear on the edge of the mud pit. When it started to rain, the big mud pit swelled up with bright white color, rising up to the base of the walls of the houses on both sides, submerging the bases of the houses. People who pass by here feel like they have encountered a blow on the road of life. It is necessary to struggle. Roll up your sleeves, grit your teeth, concentrate all your energy, hold on to the wooden wall of the house, your heart will beat loudly, don't let your head get dizzy, and don't let your eyes blur. Face it calmly. However, the wooden wall of that house was made very smooth and neat, as if it was deliberately not helping others in times of crisis, so that no matter how skillfully the passerby stretched out his hand, he could not get mercy from the wooden wall. I can't catch anything. I couldn't touch anything when I touched it. It was so smooth that there wasn't even a single knot. I wonder what wood growing on the mountain could be so intact. After struggling for 5 or 6 minutes, it finally passed. I was sweating all over my head and had a fever all over my body, not to mention that. Besides, those who came later followed the law and did not have many tricks. They just scratched here and there. After working on it for 5 or 6 minutes, it passed again. As soon as he passed by, he felt full of energy, laughed, and turned back to the people who came after him. To those who are struggling in the difficult stage. What's this? If you don't take dangerous roads several times in your life, you're not considered a hero. But that's not the case, not necessarily all of them are full of energy, but most of them are scared to the point of turning pale. Although some of them have been for a long time. I still couldn't lift my leg to walk quickly because the leg was still shaking. Although the dangerous road has passed for this kind of timid people, a sentimental emotion arises in their hearts for no reason, and their hearts tremble. As if he was moved by this big mud pit, he always looked back and looked at it for a while, as if he wanted to say something. In the end, he left without saying anything. One day, when it rained heavily, a child fell down and was rescued by a tofu seller. When he was rescued, he found out that the child was the son of the principal of the agricultural school. There was a lot of discussion, and some said that because the agricultural school was located inside the temple, the Dragon King was offended, and the Dragon King wanted to make heavy rains drown the child. Some say otherwise. It is not the case at all. It's all because of the child's father. His father was gesticulating in the lecture hall and told the students that the rain that day was not caused by the Dragon King who was in the sky. He said that there was no Dragon King. You see, this makes Lord Dragon angry to death. How could he not say this? So he captured his son to carry out karma. Some said that the students in the school were too shameless, and some climbed up on the old Dragon King's head and put a straw hat on the old Dragon King's head. What year is this? A stupid kid dared to cause such a big trouble. How could the old Dragon King not take retribution? Look, this is not the end of the matter. You think the Dragon King is not a white man. If you offend him, might he be able to spare you? It's not like dealing with a cart driver or a vegetable seller. Just give them a kick and let them go. That's the Dragon King. Is the Dragon King still in trouble? Some people said that the students in that school were too dishonest. He said that he had seen with his own eyes that the students took silkworms and put them in the hands of the old Dragon King in the main hall. Do you think the old Dragon King can bear it? Some people say that today's schools are so bad that children will never be able to go to school. As soon as I went to school, I couldn't tell the difference between heaven, earth, people, ghosts and gods. Some people say that they want to take their son back from school and stop him from studying. Some people say that when a child studies in school, the more he studies, the worse he gets. For example, if he is frightened out of his soul, what do you hear him say when his mother calls out his soul? He said it was superstition. Do you think it's okay to continue reading it? The more you talk, the farther you go. A few days passed. The big mud pit fell down again, and pedestrians on both sides of the mud pit could pass unimpeded. If it doesn't rain in a few days, the mud pit will start to dry up again. At this time, another carriage and horse began to walk on it, another carriage overturned on it, and another horse fell down and rolled in the mud. They also used ropes and sticks to lift the horses out. The ones who were carried out drove away in their carts, and those who came behind were stuck in and lifted again. We carried carts and horses in this mud pit countless times throughout the year, but no one said that it would be better to just fill the pit with soil. Not one. Once an old gentleman fell into a mud pit when the water was swollen. As soon as he climbed out, he said, "This street is too narrow. There is no place to walk after going through the blisters. Why don't you tear down the walls of the courtyards on both sides to make way for them?" As he was talking, the old lady in the courtyard spoke to him from inside the wooden wall. She said that the courtyard wall could not be demolished. She said that it would be best to plant trees. If a row of trees were planted along the base of the wall, people could climb on the trees when it rained. There are those who say they tear down walls, and there are those who say they plant trees. If there is anyone who can fill the mud pit with soil, no one can do it. Piglets have drowned in this mud pit, dogs have been suffocated with mud, cats have been suffocated to death, and chickens and ducks often die in this mud pit. The reason is that there is a hard crust on the mud pit. The animals don't know that there is a trap under the hard shell, and by the time they know it, it will be too late. They were running or flying, and once they landed on the hard shell, they could no longer stand up. It's okay during the day, or someone might come to rescue you again. There's nothing you can do about it at night. They struggle on their own. When they struggle until they have no strength, they naturally sink. In fact, the harder they struggle, the faster they sink. Sometimes it happens that the person does not sink even to the point of death. If the density of the mud is too high, this will happen. For example, when meat is on the market and suddenly cheap pork is sold, everyone thinks of the mud pit and says, "Didn't a pig drown in that mud pit again?" He said that if you have quick legs, you can run to your neighbor's house quickly and tell your neighbor, "Go and buy cheap meat, go and buy cheap meat. Go quickly, it won't be around for a while." After I took a closer look after I bought it home, something seemed wrong. Why is the meat purple and green? It can't be plagued pork. But then I thought, it could be plagued pork, it must have been drowned in the mud pit, so fried, steamed and boiled. Every family eats cheap pork. Although I tasted it, it didn't taste very fragrant, and I was afraid it was still plagued pork. But then I thought, how could I eat the plagued pork? Then I would have drowned in the mud. Originally, this mud pit only drowned 1 or 2 pigs, or 2 or 3 pigs a year. For some years not a single pig was drowned. As for the residents who often eat drowned pork, I don't know why. The Dragon King really knows it. Although he said that what he ate was pork drowned in a mud pit, some people got sick from it. The one who was sick started talking loudly and said, "Even drowned pork should not be sold in the market. Dead pork is not fresh after all. What does the tax bureau do to allow dead pork to be sold on the street in broad daylight? That's because he ate dead pork." But those who are not yet sick say, "You can't say that. You must be suspicious. You will get better if you eat half-heartedly. You see, we can also eat, but how come we don't get sick?" Occasionally, there is a child who is too ignorant of current affairs and says that his mother will not let him eat it. Said it was plague pork. Everyone dislikes such a child. Everyone stared at him and said, "Nonsense, nonsense." Once a child said that the pork must be plagued pork, and he said this to the neighbors in front of his mother. The neighbor didn't say anything firmly after hearing this, but his mother's face immediately turned red. He stretched out his hand and hit the child. The child was very stubborn and still said, "Is it a pig with plague? Is it a pig with plague?" My mother was really embarrassed. He picked up the fork from the fire next to the door and hit the child on the shoulder. So the child ran home crying. As soon as he entered the door, his grandmother was sitting on the edge of the Kong. The child cried and threw himself into her arms and said, "Grandma, aren't you eating plagued pork? My mother beat me." The grandmother wanted to comfort the poor child, but when she looked up, she saw the nanny from the Oldley family standing at the door and looking in. So the grandmother lifted up the child's back skirt. He spanked the child hard on the buttocks and said, "Who told you to do this? You're just talking nonsense." The beating was not completed until the Lee family's wet nurse took the child away. The child cried like a mess, talking about pork with plague or pork with plague. I cried so much that I couldn't even explain. In total, this mud pit provides 2 benefits to local residents. Article 1, cars and horses are often carried, and chickens and ducks are drowned. It is very noisy and can make the residents gossip and entertain themselves. The second point is the issue of pork. Without this mud pit, how could we eat plagued pork? You can eat it, but how do you say it? If you really say that you are eating plagued pork, wouldn't it be unhygienic? It's easy to deal with the mud pit. It can turn the plague pig into a flooded pig, and the residents can buy the meat. Firstly, it is economical, and secondly, it is not unhygienic. 2. There is nothing else on Dongerdeo Street except for the grand event of Danakengzi. There are just a few grinding rooms, a few tofu shops, 1 or 2 machine rooms, and maybe 1 or 2 dye vat rooms for dyeing cloth. This is just me doing my own work silently. There is nothing to make others happy, and it cannot attract any comments. People there go to bed when it gets dark and get up to work when it gets light. All year round, spring flowers bloom, autumn rain. Winter snow is just a matter of wearing cotton-padded clothes and taking off single clothes according to the season. Birth, old age, sickness and death are all handled silently and silently. For example, at the south end of Shuer Street, Widow Wang sells bean sprouts. She inserted a very high pole on the ridge of the house. A broken basket was carried on the end of the pole. Because the pole is very high, almost as high as the iron horse bell of the Dragon King Temple. When the wind blows, the bells on the temple still ring. Although Widow Wang's broken basket doesn't make any noise, it can still sway here and there. In this way, year after year passed. Widow Wang sold bean sprouts year after year, living a peaceful life without incident. Suddenly one summer, her only son went to the river to take a bath and fell into the river and drowned. This incident seemed to cause a sensation and became known to every household. But it soon calmed down. Not only the neighbors, but also her relatives and friends also forgot about this incident. As for Widow Wang, although she has gone crazy since then, she still knows how to sell bean sprouts, and she still lives quietly. Although occasionally her food was stolen and she cried wildly on the street or on the temple platform, after crying, she still lived peacefully. As for the neighbors or passers-by who saw her crying on the temple platform, they would also feel a little sympathy. But it was only for a short time. Also, people often like to group some unfortunate people together, such as madmen and fools, and treat them all the same. In that township, in that county, in that village, there are some unfortunate people, whether they are cancerous, blind, crazy, or stupid. There are many people of this kind in the city of Hulan River. It is not surprising that people seem to hear and see a lot about them. Occasionally, I met someone unfortunately on the temple platform or in the main entrance, and I just wanted to show a little compassion to that person. But then I thought, there are many such people in the world. So he turned his eyes and walked over in 2 or 3 steps. Even if someone stopped, they would just throw a stone at the madman like those children who have no memory. Or they were leading the blind man into the ditch on purpose. All unfortunate people are beggars, at least in the city of Hulan River. People treat beggars very ordinary. A group of dogs gathered in front of the door and were biting. The owner asked, Dash. What are you biting? The servant replied, Bite a beggar. It's over when it's said. It can be seen that the life of this beggar is worthless. The crazy woman selling bean sprouts, although she is crazy, she can't forget her own sorrow, and she still pays for it every now and then. Go to the temple platform and cry, but the crying is over. You still have to go home to eat, sleep, and sell bean sprouts. She is still living peacefully. 3. Besides, something unfortunate happened in the dyeing vat room. 2 young apprentices fought over a woman on the street. One of them pushed the other into the dye vat and drowned. The dead ones were not mentioned, but the living ones were also sent to prison and sentenced to life imprisonment. But this was settled quietly, and after 3 or 2 years, if anyone mentioned the matter. It's almost like people talking about Yu Fei and Qin Hui, as if they were so long ago that they don't know how many years ago. The dye vat room where this incident occurred at the same time is still in its original location, and even the vat in which people were drowned may still be used there. The cloth sold from the dye vat room is still circulated in towns near and far. From blue cloth, men began to make cotton trousers and jackets, which they wore in winter to resist the severe cold. The red cloth is made into a red robe, which is worn by girls aged 18 or 19. Let her be the bride. In short, except for the death of a person in the dye vat house on a certain day of a certain year, the rest of the world has not changed at all. Besides, something unfortunate happened in the tofu shop. 2 guys got into a fight. He actually broke the legs of the little donkey who was pulling the mill. Because it's a donkey, it's okay not to talk about it. Just because the donkey cried and blinded a woman, that is, the mother of the man who beat the donkey, so it has to be recorded. Let's talk about the paper room where paper is made. Starved an illegitimate child to death. Because he is a newborn child, he is nothing. I won't talk about him anymore. 4. On the rest of Dongerdeo Street, there are several tie-colored shops. This is for the dead. When a person dies, his soul goes to hell. In hell, I am afraid that he will have no house to live in, no clothes to wear, and no horse to ride on. The living people made such a trick for him and burned him with fire. It is said that he will have everything when he goes to the underworld. As big as money-spraying beasts, cornucopias, big gold mountains, big silver mountains, as small as maids and maids. From the cook in the kitchen to the pig officer feeding the pigs, to the flower pots, teapots and cups, chickens, ducks, geese, dogs, and even the parrots in front of the window. It looks really beautiful. The large courtyard also has a courtyard wall with golden glazed tiles on the top of the wall. Upon entering the courtyard, there are 5 main rooms and 3 side rooms. They are all blue and red brick houses with bright and clean windows and very fresh air. Flower pots were placed on the flower shelves one after another. Stone pillars, lilies, snakeheads, and 9-month chrysanthemums all bloomed at the same time. It looks like you don't know what season it is, whether it is summer or autumn. Unexpectedly, the horse snake plant and the chrysanthemum were standing together at the same time. Maybe there is no distinction between spring, summer, autumn, and winter in the underworld. Not to mention this. Besides, The cook in the kitchen is really alive and 1,000 times cleaner than the real cook. He wears a white hat and a white apron. I'm making ramen noodles in my hand. It seems that lunchtime is coming, and the noodles are ready to be served. The stable boy in the yard was standing next to a big white horse. The horse seemed to be an Arabian horse. It was very tall and stood upright. If someone rode on it,